The penthouse apartment of downtown Boston gleamed like a jewel perched above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the golden evening sun over the Charles River, while the interior radiated opulence. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and priceless abstract art that spoke of decades of wealth accumulated and flaunted. Yet despite all this grandeur, the apartment held a secret that had confounded the city's elite for months. Nathaniel Whitmore, 18 months old, had rejected every nanny hired to care for him. 15 highly trained, impeccably referenced caregivers had tried and failed. Every one of them left with bruises, scratches, and stories of the baby's ferocious temper. But today, a quiet man named Isaiah Brooks stood in the living room, cradling Nathaniel in his arms, and for the first time, the baby was calm. "He's calm," murmured Eleanor Whitmore, Nathaniel's grandmother, her voice slicing through the room like a cold wind. "Look at him. He's settled in your arms, but this cannot last. He'll be corrupted. Who knows what kind of influence you'll have on my grandson." Isaiah, 32, a former child development student turned night janitor for the Whitmore family, remained still. His dark eyes met those of Julian Whitmore, the young heiress of the Whitmore fortune, who hovered nearby with a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. "I don't understand why you're even here," Julian said, her diamonds sparkling as though mocking the simplicity of his blue uniform shirt. "We've had the best nannies money can buy, and yet here you are, a janitor holding Nathaniel like you belong." Isaiah said nothing, cradling the baby as if the world's judgment were nothing more than a whisper. Nathaniel's tiny fists, which had been weapons for months, now rested gently on Isaiah's chest. The child's eyes were half closed in a rare moment of trust, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. Eleanor scoffed. "He recognizes something in him? Please. Children are impressionable. This man is dangerous in ways you can't even comprehend." The tension in the room was thick. Julian's mother, Seraphina Whitmore, stood at the side, folding her arms like a queen surveying a miscreant in her court. "Nathaniel deserves only the best," she said, her voice icy. "You can't allow just anyone to influence him, especially someone from his class." Isaiah's response was soft, measured, and deliberate. "Maybe it's not about class," he said. "Maybe it's about authenticity." And for the first time in months, Nathaniel seems to sense someone he can trust. The room went silent. Even the family's pediatrician, Dr. Leland Chambers, a man of meticulous composure, couldn't hide the intrigue in his gaze. "Fascinating," he muttered. "In my 20 years, I've never seen such an immediate change in a child's behavior. It's as though he recognizes something in Isaiah." Julian's lips pressed into a thin line. "Something in him? He's a janitor. There's nothing in him that could possibly matter." Isaiah didn't flinch. He transferred Nathaniel to the crib, but the moment his hands moved, the baby cried, reaching his tiny arms toward him and clutching at his shirt as if refusing to let go. It was the first time Nathaniel had clung to anyone since his mother's death, the first spark of affection he had shown in months. Dr. Chambers leaned closer, murmuring, "This is unprecedented. He is responding to him instinctively. It's as if he senses genuine care." Julian crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "Instinct or some trick? There's always a trick." Isaiah remained calm, as he had learned over years of navigating spaces that underestimated him. Growing up in the Roxbury neighborhood, the son of a nurse and a mechanic, he had faced subtle and blatant prejudice throughout his life. He knew the type of venom that Eleanor and Julian wielded, disguised as concern for the child. He met Dr. Chambers' gaze, recognizing the same thing he always did in observant adults. Children perceive authenticity in a way adults, clouded by bias and entitlement, cannot. "Mr. Whitmore," Isaiah said softly, addressing Julian's sister, who had remained unusually quiet until now. "May I make a suggestion?" Julian raised an eyebrow.
I'm listening.
"Allow me to spend 1 hour with Nathaniel. If he continues to respond positively, consider that the problem might not be with the nannies, but with whoever is choosing them." The room's silence was deafening. Eleanor's face turned pale. Serafina blinked rapidly. For the first time, it seemed they realized they had underestimated the man in front of them. Isaiah maintained a serenity forged through years of subtle battles and quiet triumphs. His eyes reflected a depth that only comes from enduring hardships and coming out stronger, the kind of quiet power that makes people who are used to controlling situations reconsider. David Whitmore, Nathaniel's father, a successful real estate entrepreneur and widower, watched in silence. He had spent months worrying that his son might never trust anyone again. And now, maybe there was hope. "Yes," Isaiah said, reading the moment. "Just 1 hour. That's all I ask. After that, the truth will be clear." The stage was set. In that gleaming Boston penthouse, under the gaze of the city's elite, a quiet war had begun. One that would test intelligence, courage, and integrity. And for the first time, the Whitmore family would confront a truth they never expected: that the most powerful influence in Nathaniel's life might come from the least likely source. Isaiah sat cross-legged on the plush Persian rug of the Whitmore penthouse. Nathaniel nestled comfortably against his chest. The child's laughter echoed softly against the marble walls, a sound that had not been heard in months. He held a wooden toy gently, rolling it back and forth between his tiny hands, entirely absorbed in the play. Eleanor Whitmore, poised on a cream-colored armchair like a sculpted statue, leaned forward. Her sharp eyes flicked between Nathaniel and Isaiah, as though studying an animal in a zoo. "You really think an hour is enough?" she asked, her voice trembling with barely concealed disdain. "It's enough," Isaiah replied, his tone calm but firm. "Children are honest. If he responds to me in this hour, it's because I'm giving him something no one else has." Julian Whitmore, her fingers drumming impatiently against the arm of the couch, muttered, "Something no one else has? What is that supposed to mean?" Isaiah glanced at her, unflinching. "Trust, consistency, calm presence. Those are things no amount of wealth can buy." Julian scoffed. "Trust? You're a janitor. You're lucky you even stepped foot in this apartment." "Am I?" Isaiah asked softly. He shifted Nathaniel onto his lap so the child could reach for the blocks scattered across the floor. "Or am I lucky that he finally found someone who treats him like a person and not a project?" Julian opened her mouth to retort but paused as Nathaniel giggled, knocking down a small tower of blocks and immediately looking up at Isaiah with sparkling eyes. The child's delight was contagious, and for a moment, even Julian felt a flicker of unease. "Fascinating," Dr. Leland Chambers murmured from the corner. He had been observing silently, his clipboard resting forgotten on his lap. "This is beyond typical developmental response. He is choosing you, Isaiah. Every gesture, every reaction is voluntary and positive. This is remarkable." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Remarkable or suspicious? Don't forget that." Isaiah remained silent. Over the past 4 months, he had spent nights cleaning the Whitmore apartment. He had observed more than dust collecting in corners. He had noticed patterns, behaviors, and inconsistencies that no one else had. He had noticed Eleanor's clandestine phone calls, Julian's obsessive control over finances, and the subtle manipulations that kept the family dynamic skewed in their favor. But now was not the time to reveal that knowledge. Now was the time to establish trust with Nathaniel and let the family's arrogance reveal itself. The hour passed quickly, though it felt like an eternity to the observing Whitmores. Nathaniel crawled across Isaiah's legs to retrieve a plush giraffe, returning it to his hands with a delighted squeal. He nuzzled Isaiah's chest before reaching for another toy, and Isaiah followed his movements with effortless patience, guiding and encouraging without ever forcing. Finally, Isaiah looked up. "That's 1 hour," he said quietly. "Observe him. Decide for yourself what this means." Eleanor gasped, her knuckles white against the arm of her chair. I can't believe this. He's calm, happy, even engaged. This is impossible." Julian's lips pressed into a thin line. "You've charmed him, that's all. You've used some trick." Isaiah's eyes were steady. "No tricks, just respect. And attention." For the first time, Dr. Chambers spoke up formally. "From a clinical perspective, this is more than remarkable. Nathaniel is responding to a genuine emotional connection. His previous behaviors, aggression, withdrawal, were stress responses to his environment. Nothing here indicates a disorder." Eleanor paled. Julian's jaw tightened. Even Serafina, who had watched from the sidelines, looked uncertain. "You think an hour proves anything?" Eleanor whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and dread. "Yes," Isaiah replied, "because for the first time Nathaniel is thriving. And that tells us something about the people choosing who is allowed to care for him, or prevent him from connecting with anyone authentic." The subtle weight of his words hung in the room like a storm cloud. Julian's hand clenched around her glass of water. "What are you implying?" Isaiah stood slowly, adjusting Nathaniel in his arms. "I'm implying that 15 trained nannies failed not because of the child, but because the environment you've created is toxic. And perhaps it's time to ask why you keep hiring people who don't belong to your inner circle, instead of looking at the truth." Eleanor gasped. Julian took a step forward, but Isaiah didn't flinch. Nathaniel reached out for him again, clutching his shirt, refusing to let go. David Whitmore, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "He's happy, isn't he?" His voice carried a mixture of hope, confusion, and dawning realization. "He hasn't been like this for months, maybe even a year." "Yes," Isaiah said softly, "and if you let him continue, he could be normal again. He could be free from all the pressure, manipulation, and control that's suffocating him." The tension in the room was palpable. Eleanor and Julian exchanged worried glances. Even Serafina's arms crossed more tightly, as though bracing for a confrontation she couldn't control. Isaiah's calm presence contrasted sharply with the storm swirling in the penthouse. Every glance, every gesture, every word he spoke was deliberate, controlled, and calculated. The family didn't yet know it, but they had just met someone who had been observing them for months. Quietly, meticulously, and with a mind that was ready to dismantle their facades. As the hour concluded, Isaiah carefully placed Nathaniel back in his crib. The child's eyes followed him, wide and trusting, reaching out again. Julian's face twitched with frustration. "This can't be real," she whispered to Eleanor. Isaiah simply nodded, serene. "It is real. And in real life, authenticity always shows. Children don't lie. And Nathaniel has just spoken the truth." The Whitmore family remained frozen, their world quietly shifting around them. And Isaiah, who had walked into this gilded prison of wealth and privilege as a janitor, left knowing that the battle for Nathaniel's well-being had only just begun. A battle he was uniquely prepared to fight. The following morning, Isaiah arrived early at the Whitmore penthouse, carrying his cleaning supplies in a modest canvas bag. By now, the family had grown accustomed to his presence during the night shifts, but few suspected the depth of his observation skills. What they saw as ordinary janitorial diligence, he had transformed into intelligence gathering, a reconnaissance mission of subtle brilliance. Nathaniel greeted him instantly, reaching for his shirt and giggling. Isaiah smiled warmly. "Good morning, little man," he said, setting his bag down and lifting him gently into his arms. Nathaniel's laughter was the first sound of genuine happiness in the penthouse in months. From the hallway, Julian and Eleanor watched silently, waiting for an opportunity. Today they had planned their first attempt to undermine him, subtle, indirect, and cloaked in concern. Julian approached with a small tray of breakfast. "Isaiah," she said, her tone deceptively sweet. "I just noticed that Nathaniel has been eating more cereal than recommended. Perhaps it's a good idea if we monitor his intake? We don't want him to develop bad habits." Isaiah tilted his head, raising an eyebrow. "Of course," he replied calmly. He had anticipated this move. Over the past nights, he had reviewed Nathaniel's medical files, carefully noting allergies, nutritional requirements, and developmental milestones. The child had no issues with cereal, and he had planned to record all dietary interactions as documentation if needed. "Thank you," Julian said, smiling tightly. She stepped back, expecting Isaiah to slip up, expecting him to appear careless. Isaiah poured Nathaniel's breakfast, making sure the portion matched precisely what was recommended. He had calculated the exact amount, ensuring that any attempt to accuse him of negligence would fail. Nathaniel ate happily, occasionally looking up at Isaiah and smiling. Eleanor's lips tightened. "He's calm again," she muttered under her breath. "It can't last. Someone like you can't just change a child." Isaiah maintained his composure. He knew Eleanor and Julian's tactics well. Undermine the caregiver, create doubt in David, and claim moral superiority. But for the past 4 months, he had been watching and listening. Every conversation, every argument, every secret misstep by the family had been carefully noted. He had already discovered that Julian had been diverting Nathaniel's inheritance into secret accounts. Eleanor had manipulated David into granting her disproportionate control over the family trust. Even Serafina, who outwardly seemed neutral, had been aiding them in small ways to keep control within the family. Isaiah wasn't just here to care for Nathaniel, he was here to protect him. And the first stage of the plan had begun. Subtle evidence collection, quiet confrontation avoidance, and careful documentation. By mid-morning, Julian attempted a more direct attack. "Isaiah, I noticed you gave Nathaniel that new toy," she said, pointing to a brightly colored wooden train. "Are you sure it's safe? It wasn't in the box of approved toys I left with Dr. Chambers. Perhaps we should remove it until it's verified." Isaiah didn't flinch. "It's perfectly safe," he said, turning the toy over to inspect it as Nathaniel watched intently. "I always check everything before giving it to him. Safety first, of course." Julian's eyes narrowed. She didn't expect him to respond with such confidence and factual clarity. Every challenge she threw his way had already been anticipated, defused, and recorded in his mind. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's bond with Isaiah deepened. He crawled across the living room to a small puzzle, struggling to place the pieces. Isaiah knelt beside him, guiding his hands patiently, never taking control but offering support when necessary. Every correct placement earned Nathaniel a delighted giggle and a high five from Isaiah. Eleanor and Julian whispered between themselves. "He's good with him," Eleanor admitted reluctantly. Julian scowled. "It's unnatural. No one should have this kind of influence over Nathaniel, especially not someone from his class." Isaiah overheard every word. Instead of responding immediately, he remained silent. Patience was his weapon. Knowledge was his shield. And today, he would begin recording subtle proofs of the family's duplicity. Later that afternoon, as he wiped down the glass surfaces of the living room, he found a set of documents carelessly left on the coffee table. They were financial statements and internal emails between Julian and the family's legal counsel. Isaiah's fingers traced the lines carefully, memorizing details and snapping a few discreet photographs with his phone. The emails revealed troubling intentions. Julian had been planning to transfer significant funds from Nathaniel's inheritance into accounts she controlled. Eleanor had been colluding with her to manipulate David into decisions that would concentrate power within the family. Every detail Isaiah captured was another layer of protection for Nathaniel, and another piece of leverage if the time came to expose them. By the evening, Isaiah had compiled enough subtle evidence to begin forming a strategy. Nathaniel, now tired from the day's activities, fell asleep peacefully in his arms, a victory in itself. David Whitmore, who had been observing from the kitchen, finally spoke. He's amazing with him, he said softly. I don't know how you do it. All the others failed. Why him? Isaiah smiled faintly. Because sometimes the problem isn't the child, he said. The problem is the people deciding who should care for him. David nodded, a mix of relief and dawning understanding washing over him. For months, he had felt helpless, watching his son reject every attempt at affection. Now he saw a glimmer of hope, though he didn't yet understand the quiet, meticulous war Isaiah had already begun. As the family settled for the night, Julian and Eleanor's whispered plans for undermining Isaiah continued, but with each passing hour, the cracks in their confidence widened. Nathaniel's attachment to Isaiah was growing stronger, their manipulations becoming increasingly transparent, and the underdog, calm and patient, was quietly turning the tide. And in the quiet of the penthouse, Isaiah knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The next move would have to be precise, calculated, and unassailable, because once the Whitmore family realized the depth of his knowledge, there would be no turning back. By the fourth day of Isaiah's temporary role, the atmosphere in the Whitmore penthouse had shifted. Nathaniel's laughter filled the rooms, a stark contrast to the icy tension radiating from Julian and Eleanor. Every moment Isaiah spent with the child was a small victory, yet the family's covert attempts to undermine him had grown more sophisticated. That morning, Julian approached Isaiah with feigned concern. I've spoken to Dr. Chambers, she said, her tone clipped but carefully controlled. He suggested we observe Nathaniel's interactions with you. Perhaps there's a risk of him developing an unhealthy attachment. Isaiah's calm eyes met hers. Attachment is a natural response, Julian, he replied. What's unhealthy is a child being denied authentic connections because of fear or prejudice. Julian's lips pressed into a thin line. She was used to controlling every situation, but Isaiah's quiet authority made her uneasy. Meanwhile, Eleanor took a more indirect approach. That afternoon, she asked Isaiah to help Nathaniel with a new puzzle, one specifically designed to frustrate him. Perhaps he needs to learn patience, she said. Too much ease could spoil him. Isaiah accepted the challenge, kneeling beside Nathaniel. He guided the child gently, never forcing the pieces but offering subtle suggestions. Nathaniel's frustration quickly dissolved under Isaiah's patience, and he placed the final piece himself with a triumphant squeal. The victory was small, but symbolically enormous, proof that the child could thrive under genuine guidance, not manipulation. Eleanor scowled, clearly irked that her subtle sabotage had failed. Julian whispered, "We need to do more. He's gaining influence over Nathaniel too quickly." Isaiah, meanwhile, had begun systematically documenting everything. His night shifts had given him ample time to gather evidence. Photographs of financial discrepancies, email correspondences, and recordings of clandestine conversations. Every misstep by the Whitmore family added layers to a case he was quietly building. By evening, Julian escalated her attacks. She contacted Dr. Peterson, a renowned child psychologist, to conduct a formal evaluation. Her hope was simple: to cast doubt on Isaiah's suitability as a caregiver. She left instructions implying that Nathaniel's behavior was concerning, attempting to frame Isaiah's methods as unconventional and potentially harmful. Isaiah was prepared. While Julian and Eleanor assumed their plan was hidden, he had anticipated this move. That night, after Nathaniel had fallen asleep in his crib, Isaiah retrieved his meticulously organized files. Every conversation, every financial irregularity, and every subtle act of manipulation had been documented. Even Dr. Peterson's office correspondence was captured discreetly, not to invade privacy, but to protect Nathaniel from being used as a pawn. The following morning, as Dr. Peterson arrived for the evaluation, Isaiah calmly greeted him. "Good morning, doctor," he said, gesturing toward Nathaniel. "We're here to ensure that Nathaniel's well-being is prioritized. I'd like to provide full access to records and observations from the past week." Julian's jaw dropped. "Records? What records?" Isaiah's serene smile didn't waver. "Everything I've documented regarding Nathaniel's care, as well as the family's interactions and interventions that may affect his development." Dr. Peterson's eyes widened as Isaiah handed him a neatly organized folder. "This is impressive," the psychologist said quietly. "It appears you've been extremely thorough," Eleanor whispered. "This can't be happening." Julian's hands trembled slightly as she realized that Isaiah had not only countered their sabotage, but had anticipated it entirely. His calm authority and meticulous preparation were unraveling their plans before they even began. During the evaluation, Nathaniel displayed his usual attachment to Isaiah, seeking comfort and guidance naturally. Dr. Peterson observed silently, taking notes, but his subtle nods toward Isaiah did not go unnoticed. Even he recognized the authenticity of their bond. After the evaluation, Isaiah escorted Dr. Peterson to the kitchen, speaking quietly. "Doctor, please make a note in your report that Nathaniel's responses are positive, voluntary, and consistent. Any concerns raised by the family must be backed by concrete evidence, not assumptions or social prejudice." Dr. Peterson nodded. "Understood. Your documentation will make this clear. I've never seen such thorough observation from a caregiver before." Meanwhile, Julian and Eleanor were left in the living room, their expressions pale and tight with tension. Every plan they had hatched had been anticipated. Every manipulation countered. The underdog they had dismissed as a janitor had turned into an unassailable force of logic, observation, and calm authority. The twist was clear. The family's first serious attempt at sabotage had failed, and they were now exposed in subtle but undeniable ways. Isaiah's preparation, patience, and intelligence had not only protected Nathaniel, but had also begun to reveal cracks in the family's armor that could not easily be repaired. As the day ended, Nathaniel slept peacefully in Isaiah's arms once more. The city lights of Boston shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside the penthouse, the real storm was brewing. A battle of wit, patience, and intelligence that the Whitmore family had never anticipated. And Isaiah knew the Real challenge was just beginning. They would escalate, push boundaries, and attempt more aggressive tactics. But he was ready. Every move, every word, every observation had been anticipated. The underdog was no longer at a disadvantage. He had become the quiet architect of a revolution, one that would protect Nathaniel and ultimately dismantle the deceit and manipulation that had long controlled the Whitmore family. It began with a subtle knock on the penthouse door. Julian stood at the threshold, a forced smile plastered across her face, holding a neatly stacked folder. "David, Eleanor," she said, her voice syrupy but edged with tension. "We've arranged a meeting with family council. It's about Nathaniel's well-being." David Whitmore frowned, glancing at Isaiah. "Family council? For what?" Julian's smile didn't falter. "To ensure all legal aspects of Nathaniel's care are addressed. Dr. Peterson has suggested a formal review, and we thought it best to involve legal guidance." Eleanor chimed in, her tone more commanding than usual. "It's standard procedure. Nothing to worry about. Just precautionary measures." Isaiah's dark eyes observed quietly. This was the escalation he had anticipated. Legal intimidation, the pretense of concern to undermine his authority, and the subtle threat of removal. Yet everything they had done to prepare for him, their overconfidence, the underestimation of his intelligence, made him ready. David hesitated. "I don't want anyone questioning Isaiah's role. Nathaniel hasn't been this happy in months." Julian's smile was polite but thin. "It's just a formality, David. We're doing this for Nathaniel." The meeting was scheduled in a private law office overlooking the Boston skyline. Isaiah arrived early, carrying a binder of carefully documented evidence. Nathaniel's behavioral observations, financial documents showing the family's manipulations, photographs of irregularities, and recordings of clandestine conversations. Each piece was organized meticulously. Eleanor and Julian arrived, confident in their plan, flanked by the family's legal counsel and Dr. Peterson. They believed that by presenting their concerns in a formal, professional environment, they could discredit Isaiah's role. Isaiah remained calm. Nathaniel, now quiet in a stroller beside him, held his small blanket tightly. The child's eyes flicked to Isaiah occasionally, but otherwise remained calm. A quiet reminder of the bond that had already begun to undermine the family's control. The meeting began formally. Julian opened her folder, presenting a timeline of concerns regarding Isaiah's methods, attempting to paint him as inexperienced, emotionally manipulative, and potentially unsafe. Eleanor added anecdotes designed to question his judgment, all carefully scripted and rehearsed. Isaiah listened, expression neutral, taking mental notes. When it was his turn, he spoke softly but deliberately. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your concerns, but I have documented every interaction Nathaniel has had with me over the past week. His behavior, emotional responses, and developmental progress are all positive, consistent, and voluntary." He handed the binder to the lawyer representing Nathaniel's interests. "All these observations are supported by medical records, expert notes, and direct evidence of the family's interventions. If there are concerns about Nathaniel's well-being, they must be backed by evidence, not assumptions or social prejudice." A subtle gasp rippled through the room. Julian's hands trembled slightly. Eleanor's expression hardened, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty. The evidence Isaiah had gathered systematically dismantled the narrative they had planned. Dr. Peterson, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "I've reviewed these documents," he said, holding up Isaiah's binder. "The observations and records are comprehensive. Nathaniel's responses are positive and healthy. Any assertions to the contrary are unsubstantiated." Julian leaned forward. "But Dr. Peterson, surely a child can be influenced, excessively attached." Dr. Peterson's gaze was steady. "Attachment to a consistent, caring adult is not only normal, it's necessary for healthy development. The child demonstrates security, curiosity, and emotional stability. There is no evidence of harm or manipulation. Eleanor whispered harshly, "This is impossible. He can't be this prepared." Isaiah smiled faintly, calm as ever. "Preparation comes from observing reality, Eleanor. And reality is that Nathaniel responds to care, consistency, and respect, not fear, status, or coercion." The meeting reached its first twist. The lawyer representing Nathaniel's interests, a sharp-minded woman named Dr. Simone Harris, requested permission to call witnesses. Isaiah had anticipated this. He had enlisted Professor Malcolm Reed, a child development expert and former mentor, who arrived discreetly moments later. Professor Reed addressed the room with quiet authority. "I have reviewed the documented observations provided by Mr. Isaiah Brooks. The child demonstrates healthy attachment, emotional stability, and significant developmental progress under his care. Any attempts to question his competence should be grounded in evidence, not social prejudice." Julian's face paled. Eleanor's hand gripped the edge of the table. The tide had already begun to shift, and the family could feel it. Isaiah didn't press further. He simply observed, letting the evidence, the experts, and Nathaniel's calm presence speak for itself. But the Whitmores were not yet defeated. As the meeting progressed, Julian attempted a final tactic, a subtle threat of social exposure. Mr. Whitmore, perhaps the neighbors, the club, and other families should be made aware of unconventional caregiving methods. Isaiah's eyes darkened slightly, not in anger, but in quiet calculation. If exposure is necessary, it will be based on facts, not assumptions or prejudice. And when that happens, the truth will speak for itself. By the end of the meeting, the Whitmore family had no legal ground to act against Isaiah. Their attempts at intimidation, manipulation, and social pressure had failed. Every argument they had prepared was systematically dismantled by evidence, careful observation, and expert testimony. David Whitmore finally spoke, relief and astonishment mixing in his voice. "Isaiah, I can't believe how thorough you've been. I had no idea." Isaiah nodded gently, glancing at Nathaniel, who now played quietly with blocks nearby. "I did what had to be done. Nathaniel deserves safety, trust, and care, nothing else." Outside the office, the Boston skyline glittered against the evening sky. Inside, a silent battle had concluded with Isaiah holding the upper hand, but he knew the real challenge was just beginning. The Whitmore family's desperation would only grow, and the next moves would be more dangerous, more cunning. Isaiah, however, had one advantage they could never anticipate: time, observation, and meticulous preparation. He had turned the first wave of sabotage into a decisive victory. But the war for Nathaniel's future was far from over. The morning after the hearing, the Whitmore penthouse was unusually silent. The atmosphere, usually filled with Julian's clipped commands and Eleanor's cold authority, had thickened into something else: fear. For the first time in years, they had lost control of a situation. Isaiah arrived quietly, his posture calm as always. Nathaniel, recognizing his presence instantly, reached out with open arms. "Zay!" he squealed. Isaiah smiled, lifting him gently. "Good morning, little man." David stood near the window holding a cup of coffee, watching the two. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "Maybe we need to give you something more permanent. You've done more for Nathaniel in 2 weeks than anyone else has in a year." Julian nearly dropped her glass of water. "David, that's premature." "No," he interrupted. "It's logical." Eleanor's expression hardened. "David, you don't understand what's at stake. Our reputation. Reputation doesn't raise a child," he said simply. "Love does." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the sound of Nathaniel's laughter as he played with Isaiah's tie. For Julian and Eleanor, the realization was sinking in. They were losing control not just of the child, but of David himself. That night, while the family gathered for dinner, Isaiah quietly cleaned the study. He noticed an open laptop on the desk, its screen displaying several emails. One message stood out. Subject line, Crisis Management Strategy. He read silently. Julian had contacted a well-known public relations firm that specialized in reputation restoration and narrative control. Their plan was detailed and ruthless. Leak rumors about Isaiah's past. Imply inappropriate behavior to ignite suspicion. Frame him as an opportunist seeking financial gain. Isaiah's jaw tightened, though his expression remained calm. He took discreet photos of the emails, uploading them to a secure drive. This wasn't just a game of manipulation anymore. It was character assassination. The next morning, the first whispers appeared online. An anonymous blog post titled, "Who is Watching Nathaniel Whitmore?" began circulating in Boston's upper circles. It painted Isaiah as a mysterious outsider with a questionable background and suspicious proximity to power. By afternoon, the gossip had reached the elite social clubs, private schools, and business circles. The Whitmores hadn't even needed to confirm the rumors. Silence was enough to make them believable. David confronted Julian in the living room. "Did you do this?" he demanded, voice trembling with anger. Julian's mask of innocence slipped for just a second. "We did what we had to do. He's becoming too influential. This family cannot afford scandal." David's tone hardened. "You created the scandal." Meanwhile, Isaiah faced the storm with calculated composure. Reporters had begun calling the penthouse, curious about the mysterious caretaker. He gave no interviews, no statements, no reactions. Instead, he worked silently, spending his hours with Nathaniel, ensuring the child's routine remained undisturbed. In private, however, Isaiah began preparing his counterstrike. He had evidence, not just of the family's financial corruption, but of this orchestrated smear campaign. The documentation was airtight. Dates, IP addresses, payments to the PR firm, and internal communications. He reached out to a trusted journalist, Naomi Reyes, an investigative reporter known for exposing corruption in high places. She had built her reputation dismantling political scandals and corporate deceit. Their meeting was discreet, late at night, at a small cafe in Cambridge. Naomi leaned forward, scanning the files Isaiah placed on the table. "You're telling me the Whitmores fabricated a scandal to discredit you?" Isaiah nodded. "Yes, but this isn't about me. It's about Nathaniel. He's being used as leverage in a war for control. I'm protecting him, and I won't stop." Naomi studied him for a long moment. "You realize this could destroy them?" He met her gaze. "Only if the truth is destructive." By the end of the meeting, Naomi had agreed to investigate quietly. "I won't publish anything yet," she said. "But when I do, it'll be bulletproof." Meanwhile, in the Whitmore penthouse, the family's internal tensions began to fracture. David, disgusted by Julian's tactics, distanced himself. Eleanor doubled down, insisting the family must defend its legacy at all costs. But even among the Whitmores, doubt began to spread. Serafina, the quiet cousin who had always followed orders, started questioning the morality of the plan. Late one night, she slipped Isaiah a small flash drive. "You didn't get this from me," she whispered, "but you'll want to see what's on it." The drive contained encrypted files, bank transfers, offshore accounts, and confidential memos that proved Julian had embezzled millions from the Whitmore Foundation. It was enough to ruin her publicly and legally. Isaiah stared at the data, a mixture of disbelief and grim satisfaction washing over him. This was the leverage he had been waiting for, the piece that could end their manipulation once and for all. But he knew the danger was escalating. The Whitmores wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatened their power. That night, as Isaiah watched Nathaniel sleep, the city lights flickering through the window, he made a silent vow. They can tarnish my name. They can twist the truth. But they will never touch him. In another part of Boston, Naomi Reyes began her deep dive. Every document Isaiah had provided, every transaction, every communication, was cross-referenced, verified, and corroborated. What she uncovered went far beyond the smear campaign. It wasn't just corruption. It was betrayal, theft, and blackmail woven into the very fabric of the Whitmore legacy. When Isaiah received her encrypted message days later, it contained only 4 words. "It's worse than you think." He exhaled slowly, knowing the war had entered its final phase. The battle had moved beyond reputation. It was now a fight for truth and survival. The first sign that the Whitmore empire was cracking came on a Friday morning. Boston woke to headlines that made the city's upper class choke on their coffee. Whitmore Foundation under investigation. Allegations of fraud and misappropriation surface. Below the headline, a familiar byline, Naomi Reyes, the Boston Herald. The article was surgical. It didn't sensationalize. It presented evidence. Offshore transfers, falsified invoices, and internal memos signed by Julian and Eleanor. Every document was verified, every quote cross-checked. It was airtight. Isaiah read the article in silence as sunlight poured through the penthouse windows. Across the breakfast table, Julian's face drained of color. Eleanor's trembling hand spilled coffee across the marble. David looked up from his phone, voice low but sharp. "Is this true?" Julian stammered. It's a misunderstanding. This is defamation." David slammed the phone on the table. "The documents are real, Julian. They're all here. What did you do?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Nathaniel, oblivious to the chaos, played quietly on the floor. Isaiah watched him with calm eyes, though his mind raced. Naomi had released the story earlier than planned, which meant something had forced her hand. He stepped outside to call her. "Naomi," he said, "you published." Her voice on the other end was strained. "I didn't have a choice. Someone leaked part of it to a rival outlet last night. I had to move fast before they twisted the story. But Isaiah," she paused, "they know it came from your side. You need to be careful." He glanced through the glass door at Julian, now pacing furiously, whispering to Eleanor. "They'll come after me," he said quietly. "That's fine, as long as Nathaniel stays safe." But safety was no longer guaranteed. By noon, reporters had surrounded the building. Photographers crowded the sidewalks. Security guards struggled to keep order. And the Whitmore penthouse, once a symbol of wealth and control, became a fortress under siege. David retreated to his study, visibly broken. Julian, however, was already plotting. "We're not going down alone," she hissed to Eleanor. "If we burn, he burns with us." Eleanor's eyes flashed coldly. "Then we make him look like the instigator." They moved quickly. Within hours, an anonymous statement appeared online. Sources close to the Whitmore family confirmed that a disgruntled employee, posing as a caretaker, fabricated documents and colluded with the media to extort money. The timing was strategic, damage control disguised as victimhood. The story spread fast, amplified by the same PR networks Julian had once used to destroy rivals. Isaiah, anticipating this move, remained composed. But when police arrived at the penthouse later that evening with a warrant to question him, even David looked shaken. I don't believe this, David said, pacing. Isaiah, you know I trust you. It's all right, Isaiah interrupted calmly. Let them ask. The lead detective, a weary woman named Lieutenant Graves, entered with quiet authority. Mr. Brooks, we're here to clarify your involvement in the recent allegations surrounding the Whitmore Foundation. You're not under arrest, but I need your cooperation. Isaiah nodded. Of course. He handed over a sealed envelope. Inside were digital timestamps, encrypted records, and evidence of the original source trail, all showing that Naomi's investigation had been independent and verified long before his involvement. Lieutenant Graves scanned the documents. Her eyes widened. This clears you completely. Julian's composure cracked. That can't be possible, she snapped. He's lying. No, Graves said evenly. You are, and you're about 3 steps from a formal indictment. The color drained from Julian's face. Eleanor whispered something under her breath, her confidence shattering in real time. Isaiah, maintaining his quiet poise, turned to Nathaniel. The boy clung to his leg, sensing the tension. Isaiah knelt, pressing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You're safe, little man, he murmured. Always. When Graves and her team left, David faced Isaiah with a mix of guilt and awe. I don't know how to thank you, he said. You didn't just protect Nathaniel. You saved this family from itself. Isaiah shook his head. I didn't do it for them, he said softly. I did it for him. That night, the penthouse was eerily quiet. Julian had locked herself in her room. Eleanor had vanished to a hotel under the pretext of damage control. And David spent hours pacing, muttering about lawyers and restitution. Isaiah sat by the window, Nathaniel asleep in his lap, staring at the city lights. The war was nearly over, but not quite. At midnight, his phone buzzed. It was Naomi again. I have something you need to see, she said. Check your email, and don't wait. Isaiah opened the encrypted file. Inside were transcripts from an internal source, messages between Julian and Eleanor from weeks ago, long before he entered their lives. They weren't just embezzling funds. They were planning to transfer full custody of Nathaniel to Eleanor through manipulation and legal coercion, effectively cutting David and the boy's inheritance out of the picture. The pieces locked into place. Every hostile glance, every attempt to discredit him, every sudden burst of control. It had all been about ownership, not care. Isaiah felt a chill run through him. He wasn't just protecting a child anymore. He was standing in the way of a conspiracy. Outside, the wind howled through the city, echoing against the glass towers. Inside, Isaiah whispered to the sleeping child, "They'll try one last time, but I'll be ready." And in the distance, across the river, a black car sat idling with its headlights off. Inside, Eleanor Whitmore's cold eyes stared up at the penthouse. "Tonight," she murmured, voice icy, "we finish this." The city was wrapped in a curtain of rain when Isaiah's phone rang again. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer until instinct told him something was wrong. "Mr. Brooks," a voice rasped. "If you want to see the boy again, come alone. Pier 49. Midnight." The line went dead. Isaiah froze. His heart thudded once, then steadied. He rushed to Nathaniel's room. Empty crib. Blanket still warm. On the wall, a single message scrawled in lipstick. "You thought you could outsmart us." He grabbed his coat, his mind already calculating. The elevator was too obvious. The service stairs led to the garage unseen. Outside, the rain slashed across the windshield as he drove through the sleeping city. Naomi's number flashed on his phone again, but he couldn't answer. Not yet. Pier 49 was deserted except for the hiss of rain and the ghostly glow of a single lamp. A black SUV idled near the edge. Its taillights glowed like two eyes in the dark. Eleanor stood beside it, umbrella in hand, immaculate even in the storm. Her lips curved in a brittle smile. You just don't know when to stop, do you? Where's Nathaniel? Isaiah's voice was low but deadly calm. In the car. Unharmed, for now. Julian stepped out from the shadows, mascara running, eyes feverish. You ruined us. You destroyed everything. No, Isaiah said. You did that to yourselves. Eleanor's laugh was soft, almost pitying. Do you think the world will believe your story, Mr. Brooks? A janitor, a cleaner, whatever you were, claiming to be a hero while two respectable women are framed for crimes? We still have money, influence. We can fix this. Isaiah took a slow step forward. You had all the influence in the world, and you used it to hurt your own family. Family is about control, Eleanor snapped. That's what keeps order. My grandson will thank me one day. She raised her hand slightly. From the SUV, a bodyguard stepped out, broad, silent, armed. Isaiah didn't flinch. He'd expected worse. Before Eleanor could speak again, the screech of tires split the rain. Two unmarked sedans skidded to a halt behind him. Lieutenant Graves stepped out, coat plastered to her skin, her voice cutting through the storm. Drop it, all of you. We have enough evidence to bury the both of you. Eleanor's composure cracked. How did you? Your phones, Isaiah said quietly. You really should have turned off location sharing. Julian lunged toward him, screaming incoherently. Graves' officers restrained her. Eleanor's umbrella slipped from her fingers. For a heartbeat, she looked ancient, small against the vast black river. Then she whispered, almost to herself, he was never supposed to survive without us. As officers led them away, Isaiah opened the SUV door. Nathaniel looked up, tear-streaked but unharmed. Hey, Isaiah said softly, lifting him into his arms. It's over. You're safe now. The child buried his face in his shoulder, trembling. And for the first time in months, Isaiah allowed himself to breathe. The following days blurred together in a storm of press conferences, legal filings, and shocked interviews. Naomi's story exploded nationwide. The recordings, the evidence, the kidnapping attempt, every detail was public. Eleanor and Julian were arrested on charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy and child endangerment. Their assets were frozen. Their reputations turned to ash. David Whitmore, grief-stricken yet relieved, held a televised statement. I owe my son's safety and our family's redemption to Isaiah Brooks. He saw truth where privilege blinded us. The city devoured the story, from janitor to savior, the man who exposed Boston's elite. Social feeds lit up with admiration and outrage in equal measure. Isaiah, ever calm, declined interviews. He stayed home with Nathaniel, rebuilding the quiet routine the boy had once known. But when Naomi visited one evening, camera bag over her shoulder, she asked the question that lingered in every viewer's mind. What now, Isaiah? You've got the country's attention. What are you going to do with it? He smiled faintly. Turn it into something useful. For kids who grow up like me, and for the ones born into cages of gold. She raised an eyebrow. A foundation? He nodded. The Open Doors Initiative. Training, mentorship, legal aid for caregivers and children who get lost between classes and colors. Naomi grinned. You know that's going to terrify a lot of rich people. Good, Isaiah said. They should be terrified. Spring returned to Boston. The harbor no longer looked like the place where lives ended. It looked like a beginning. The Open Doors Initiative headquarters, once an abandoned daycare, buzzed with energy. Volunteers sorted donated books. Counselors interviewed parents. Children played freely in the courtyard. Isaiah had rebuilt himself. David arrived with Nathaniel in tow, carrying a small envelope. "Court finally settled it," he said, smiling. "You're officially his legal guardian if anything ever happens to me." Isaiah hesitated, emotion thick in his throat. "You don't have to." "I want to," David interrupted. "You saved my son. You saved me." Nathaniel tugged Isaiah's sleeve. "Papa Zay, can we go to the park?" The nickname made Isaiah laugh. "Of course we can." As they walked outside, Naomi watched from a distance, camera in hand. She wasn't filming for clicks this time, just capturing a truth the world rarely saw. A man who had turned pain into purpose and prejudice into power. Across the harbor, the Whitmore mansion stood empty, its windows dark, its gardens overgrown. Justice hadn't just been served, it had transformed the city's conversation. A new voice spoke for those who cleaned the floors, fixed the lights, cared for the children no one else could handle. And his message was simple. Dignity doesn't need permission. It just needs courage. The wind off the Atlantic carried the words through the city as the camera pulled back, rain turning to sunlight. Isaiah lifted Nathaniel high into the air. The child laughed, a bright, free sound.